Today podcast title is The Human Body, Nudity, Culture, and Meaning Across Time. Hello and welcome to everybody. Today we're exploring a topic that often feels sensitive, but it is deeply rooted in human history, biology, and culture. That is nudity. Not in a sensational way, but in a human way. Because before clothing, before modern society, and even before many of our social rules, there was simply the human body living, adapting, and surviving in nature. So let's take a calm, thoughtful journey through time and understand what nudity has meant and what it still means today. Let's start with what is nudity. It is simplest. Nudity is the state of the human body without clothing, but culturally it is much more than that. Across societies, nudity can mean freedom, vulnerability, shame, beauty, identity, or even spirituality, especially depending on where and when they look. In some places, nudity has been completely normal in daily life. In others, it has been tightly controlled by social rules, religion, or law. So, already we see something important. Nudity is not just a physical condition, it is a crucial idea. Secondly, secondly, we have to talk about the early humans and the natural body. Interesting, right? If we go far back in human history, there are tens of thousands of years. Early humans likely have without clothing for long periods of time. In warm climates, clothing wasn't always necessary for survival. Early humans were already biologically adapted for heat regulation through sweating and their reduced body hair. But as humans evolved, something important has changed. We didn't just survive, we began to express ourselves. Early humans started using body paint, jewelers, tattoos, and ornaments. These were not just decorations, these were forms of communication, signals of identity, group belonging, status, or ritual meanings. Clothing likely developed lately for this same impulse, not only to protect the body but to communicate meaning. So, clothing and nudity evolved together as part of human culture, not simply as opposite, but as extensions of how we express being human. Segment 3 would be nudity in ancient civilizations. In ancient societies like Egypt, Greece, and Rome, nudity had very different meanings depending on context structure. For example, in everyday labor, farming, fishing, construction, people might work with minimal clothing, especially in the hot climates. But in public life, clothing often indicated social status. In ancient Greece, nudity also had a symbolic role. In athletes and sculpture, the nude body was associated with strength, beauty, and even ideals of heroism. It was not always seen as private or shameful, but sometimes as something connected to art and physical excellence. In contrast, other culture placed stronger emphasis on modest dress as a marker of status, morality, or order. So even in ancient times, we already see a pattern. The meaning of nudity has never universal. It always depends on the culture. So, as a section 4, we headed to religion, morality, and changing views. As civilization developed, especially under the influence of major religious conditions and traditions, Ideas about nudity began to shift in many regions. In several societies, nudity became more closely linked with modesty, morality, and social boundaries. The body has no longer just biological, it became moralized. What is acceptable in one setting could be seen as inappropriate in another. This shift also changed daily life. Clothing became more structured and covering the body in public. That became a strong social expectations in many parts of the world. At the same time, it's important to note that this was not universal. Different regions maintain very different traditions regarding the body bathing and clothing practices. Human culture, again, was not one single story, but many parallel stories. Then we headed to colonial encounters and cultural misunderstandings. When Europe explores encountered indigenous cultures across Africa, the Americas, and other tropical regions, they often interpreted nudity through their own cultural lens. In many of these societies, clothing was minimal due to climate, particularly in tradition. The body was not necessarily viewed through the same moral framework that Europeans used. This difference often led to misunderstanding. What one culture saw as normal, another might label as improper, based not on biology but on cultural assumptions. This trends use of something important. Judgments about nudity are often reflections of cultural values, not universal truth. So, we want to know more about the nudity in modern society. Let's dive in. In today's world, most of the societies require clothing in public spaces. Laws and social norms define where and when nudity is acceptable. However, nudity still exists in many forms. In art, where it can represent beauty and emotion. In medicine, where it is practical and clinical. In sports and recreation, in some cultures. In private life, where it is personal and contextual. There are also movements like naturism, which promote the social nudity in spaces, specific environments as a way of reconnecting with the body and nature in a non sexual context. At the same time, other groups strongly emphasize modesty for culture or religious reasons. So, modern society holds a wide spectrum of beliefs, sometimes even within the same country. Let's explore about the psychology and social meaning. Psychologically, nudity can trigger very different reactions depending on upbringing and the environment. For some people, it may feel natural and neutral. For others, it may feel uncomfortable or highly sensitive. This is because the human brain learns social meaning early in life. What the body represents is shaped by culture, not instinct alone. Nudity can symbolize vulnerability because clothing is often linked to protection and social identity. But it can also symbolize the honesty, simplicity, and freedom. Don't you think so? So again, the meaning is not so fixed, it is learned. What is being said? The key idea is context changes everything. Perhaps the most important idea in this entire discussion is this: nudity has no single meaning. It changes depending on time period, culture, situation, intention, social norms. The same human body can be seen as natural, artistic, inappropriate, or sacred depending on context.